So John Durham finally just dropped his report, which we've been waiting on for a very long time. And I'm sure you've heard all kinds of different things about it. Maybe you've heard that it exonerates Trump, and maybe you've heard that it exonerates the FBI. Well, I want you to hear for yourself, and I'm going to go ahead and break this into multi-part series. And this first series, or this first part in the series, is going to be all about the Crossfire hurricane investigation. And so I think it's very important for you to hear this for yourself. There's a lot of information in here, and you're not going to hear it all from people just throwing out their opinions about what's in here. So it's better for you to just hear it from the source and see it. So go ahead and stick around, hit the like button, and subscribe, and you're going to enjoy it. Alright, we're going to start at the beginning of Crossfire Hurricane. Everything previously in the report to this is just the legal basis for them actually doing the investigation and the legal basis for all the different crimes that they were investigating. And you're more than welcome to check that out yourself, but I just want to talk about what happened with this investigation and the actual malice behind it. So let's start the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, and this is going to start with number one, the New York Field Office investigation page. And what they're talking about is they're talking about Carter Page. Carter Page was named the foreign policy advisor to Donald Trump's campaign. Now, Carter Page was an energy consultant, and he had prior experience with Russian and Eurasian energy issues, and he was frequently in contact with Russian nationals just because of business. And he was already known to the FBI. He was interviewed by the FBI 3 times between 2009 and 2013. He was interviewed because they were doing an investigation on these Russian intelligence officers, and they were later on indicted. But the thing that they were trying to do is recruit Carter Page. So it was a failed recruitment. One of them called him an idiot, and Page does not seem to have been receptive to the recruitment. But the point is, they were already known. Carter Page was already known to the FBI. He already had a working relationship. In April 2016, just shortly after Page was named an advisor to the Trump campaign, New York Field Office opened a counterintelligence investigation on him. According to the case agent, the matter, we're calling him New York Field Office Case Agent 1. In opening the investigation, the FBI was not so concerned about Page, but rather it was concerned about the Russians reaching out to Page, which we already know from history the Russians did reach out to Page and nothing came of it. They had no plans to seek FISA coverage, and this was not a huge deal, but it started to become a bigger deal. So as Page's role as a foreign policy advisor, quote, did not influence their decision to open a case on Page, but Director Comey had requested relevant information pertaining to any presidential candidate, and in line with that directive, Comey was briefed on the Page investigation, and later he made it a top priority. And they did this without opening an investigation as a sensitive investigative matter, which would have made sure that everything stayed under wraps, and it wouldn't have affected the campaign or Carter Page. Next, evidence of predisposition to investigate Trump. The record reviewed by the office demonstrated a rather clear predisposition on the part of at least certain FBI personnel at the center of Crossfire Hurricane to open an investigation of Trump. For example, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, we know they were having an affair, and they're both disgraced FBI personnel. Neither one of them work for the FBI anymore. In fact, Peter Strzok is suing the FBI for wrongful termination. We'll see how that goes. But they were directly involved in matters relating to the opening of Crossfire Hurricane, and Strzok was the agent who both wrote and approved the electronic communication for the opening. And McCabe was the boss at that time, Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, and he, according to Strzok, is the one who directed him to open the investigation. So Strzok and Page exchanged numerous messages throughout the years, and you're more than welcome to pause and take a look at that, but I think they've been out in the public domain long enough that I'm not going to read through them, but you're more than welcome to take a look at them here. As discussed further below, the next day on July 28, 2016, FBI headquarters received Australian information that formed the basis for the opening of Crossfire Hurricane. So this page stuff is all prior to the opening of Crossfire Hurricane. It's just one little piece that they're already looking into. So immediately they opened Crossfire Hurricane, and he struck, both drafted and approved, with the authorization of Assistant Director Priestap. Similarly, and as discussed in more detail below, Attorney Kleinsmith, who you might remember was the first one who actually got charged out of all this, he made troubling statements demonstrating a blatant political bias against Trump. And Kleinsmith, who played a central role in the Page FISA process, which that's what he ended up getting in trouble for, on the day after Trump's election as president, Trump stated to a fellow FBI personnel, among other things, "Vive la résistance." He turned French. An obvious reference to those individuals opposed to Trump. Although those involved in opening Crossfire Hurricane investigation denied that bias against Trump was a factor in opening the investigation, the communications quoted above quite clearly show, at least on the part of certain personnel ultimately involved in the matter, a predisposition to open an investigation on Trump. Number 3, the opening of Crossfire Hurricane. The FBI opened Crossfire Hurricane as a full counterintelligence investigation, quote, to determine whether individuals associated with Trump campaign were witting of and or coordinating activities with the government of Russia. The starting point for the office's inquiry was to examine what information was known or available to the FBI about any such ties as of July. Now that brings us to our next section, the opening of Crossfire Hurricane. The FBI opened Crossfire Hurricane as a full counterintelligence investigation, quote, to determine whether individuals associated with the Trump campaign were witting of and or coordinating activities with the government of Russia. The starting point for the office's inquiry was to examine what information was known or available to the FBI about any such ties as of July 31st, 2016, prior to opening Crossfire Hurricane. And when they say the office, he's talking about John Durham's office. That question then divided itself into two related questions. So these are the questions that John Durham is asking. First, what was the information that predicated the opening of the investigation? And second, did that information support such an investigation opening, not as an assessment or preliminary investigation, but from the start as a full investigation? In exploring these questions, we determined the following. So a full investigation is something that normally you don't go straight to. You start with a preliminary or an assessment to see if the information that you have is legit. So A, the information used to predicate Crossfire Hurricane. So this is what they used to open Crossfire Hurricane, the investigation that plagued Trump for 3 years. In March 2016, the Trump campaign identified George Papadopoulos as a foreign policy advisor. Papadopoulos had previously worked as an energy consultant with a particular focus on projects in the Eastern Mediterranean. At the time of his appointment, Papadopoulos was employed with the United Kingdom at the London Centre of International Law Practice. So I'm going to summarize this. So while he was working at the law practice, he had a buddy there who had an Australian buddy who was a diplomat. And the Australian guy wanted to meet Papadopoulos because he was interested in the campaign. And so his friend set Papadopoulos up, and they ended up meeting, and High Commissioner Alexander Downer happened to show up to this meeting, and they were just having drinks in a public setting. And all they were interested in was his role in the Trump campaign. But in July of 2016, July 26, Australia provided the U.S. Embassy in London certain information its diplomats had memorialized at or around the time of the meetings with Papadopoulos. And the reason we'll see for that is because of the WikiLeaks. It wasn't because they were worried about anything Papadopoulos said. They thought the things that Papadopoulos were saying was related to the WikiLeaks leak. So here's what they sent over, and here's what Papadopoulos said. They called this thing Paragraph 5. Paragraph 5 was the name given to the raw information provided by and included in a May 16, 2016 cable that documented the diplomats' encounters with Papadopoulos. Paragraph 5 is an abstract from the cable and was quoted verbatim in the Crossfire Hurricane Opening Electronic Communication, or EC, stating in its entirety that Mr. Papadopoulos was unsurprisingly confident that Mr. Trump could win the election. He commented that the Clintons had, quote, a lot of baggage, and suggested the Trump team had plenty of material to use in its campaign. He also suggested the Trump team had received some kind of suggestion from Russia that it could assist this process with the anonymous release of information during the campaign that would be damaging to Mrs. Clinton and President Obama. It was unclear whether he or the Russians were referring to material acquired publicly or through other means. It was also unclear how Mr. Trump's team reacted to the offer. We note that Trump's team's reaction could, in the end, have little bearing of what Russia decides to do with or without Mr. Trump's cooperation. So they don't even need Trump if they want to do something bad. The Australian account reflects the two meetings as a casual nature, and their feelings that they got from meeting with Papadopoulos was that some of them liked him, some of them thought he was just trying to impress other people, and he's kind of a younger guy. Mr. Downer was actually a little bit impressed with the way he acted, and in fact, here's what Downer noted about Papadopoulos. He was impressed Papadopoulos acknowledged his lack of expertise and felt the response was uncommon for someone of Papadopoulos' age, political experience, and for someone thrust into the spotlight overnight. Many people in a similar position would represent themselves differently, and Downer would have sniffed them out. If Downer believed Papadopoulos was a fraud, he would not have recorded and reported on the meeting he had with Papadopoulos. Downer also said that he did not get the sense Papadopoulos was the middleman to coordinate with the Russians. The Australian diplomats would later inform the FBI and subsequently the office that the impetus for passing the Paragraph 5 was, like I said, the WikiLeaks and the DNC hack. The lack of intelligence, information supporting the premise of Crossfire Hurricane. Now we're going to get to, they opened this thing and we're going to find out what they had, which was what they didn't have. As an initial matter, there is no question that the FBI had an affirmative obligation to closely examine the Paragraph 5 information. The Paragraph 5 information, however, was the sole basis cited by the FBI for opening a full investigation. Again, not a preliminary, a full investigation into individuals associated with the ongoing Trump campaign. Significantly, the FBI opened a full investigation before any preliminary discussions or interviews were undertaken with either the Australian diplomats or Papadopoulos himself. Further, the opening EC does not describe any collaboration or joint assessments of the information with either friendly foreign intelligence services or other U.S. intelligence agencies. In effect, within 3 days of its receipt of the Paragraph 5 reporting, the FBI determined, without further analysis, that Australian information was an adequate basis for the opening of a full investigation into whether individuals associated with an ongoing presidential campaign were witting of and or coordinating activities with the government of Russia. In his interview with the office, Executive Assistant Director for National Security, Michael Steinbach, commented on the sufficiency of the information in the opening EC, stating that it was, quote, poorly written. Steinbach added that The EC should not be read to suggest that the FBI was investigating the Trump campaign, but only those potential subjects within the campaign whose activities justified inquiry. Steinbeck was also questioned separately by the OIG on the amount of information that should normally be included in an EC opening a counterintelligence case. He stated that it should be a logical summary sufficient to justify the opening. Steinbeck told the OIG by way of an example, quote, "It's, hey look, I have Mike Steinbeck on this date, met with a Russian who we know is associated with this intelligence organization, and lay that out and open a PI, which is a preliminary investigation." Now note, he didn't say open a full investigation. He said open a preliminary investigation, which is not what they did in this case. Although not referenced in the opening EC, FBI officials have later pointed to the importance of the Australian information when viewed in conjunction with Russia's likely connections to WikiLeaks and its efforts to interfere in the 2016 elections. And then they put the quote in here of Trump saying, "Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find those 30,000 emails that are missing." A widely reported statement that appears to have referred to emails stored on the personal server that Clinton used while Secretary of State. The evidence the office reviewed shows that there were internal discussions FBI headquarters executives, including the deputy director, had about the decision to open Crossfire Hurricane. The executives were unanimous in supporting the opening of the investigation. There was no indication that these discussions contemplated anything short of an immediate full investigation, such as an assessment or preliminary investigation into the meaning, credibility, and underpinning of the statements attributed to Papadopoulos. And we see here they went against the rules for opening a investigation. These are the DIOG and AGG DOM. These are the rules for opening investigations, and it does say, also explicitly cautions FBI employees to avoid reputational risk to those being investigated by, among other things, specify different standards for opening an assessment or preliminary investigation and a full investigation with a corresponding continuum of permissible investigative activities. That measured approach does not appear to have been followed with respect to Crossfire Hurricane. Ouch. Instead, as described above, on a Sunday, and just 3 days after receiving the unanalyzed information from Australia, Strzok authorized and approved the Crossfire Hurricane opening EC. Thus, a full counterintelligence investigation into an SIM was triggered at the height of a political campaign, before any dialogue with Australia or the intelligence community, and prior to any critical analysis of the information itself or the potential risk of error or disinformation, issues that appropriately are addressed during assessments or preliminary investigations. So the FBI is so worried about disinformation, but they'll believe anything as long as it follows what they want. The information from Papadopoulos was, in the words of one FBI executive, quote, "a tipping point." And I don't understand this, because what was there before? How was this a tipping point? There was a bunch of rumors. There wasn't anything factual there. So they found one little thing, and that was the tipping point. It seems like they were just waiting to tip. When interviewed by the OIG, FBI Deputy General Counsel Tricia Anderson stated that it would have been a dereliction of duty had the FBI not opened Crossfire Hurricane. It's ridiculous. For his part, FBI General Counsel James Baker, who later went to Twitter and helped censor people, told the OIG that the opening of an investigation and doing it quickly is a good thing for oversight because it forces the institution of the FBI and eventually the Department of Justice to have appropriate management controls over what's going on. Control. In this regard, the OIG review found that in early August 2016, after the opening of Crossfire Hurricane, NSD officials were briefed on at least 2 occasions about the investigation. FBI officials have acknowledged that they were aware that the information concerning Papadopoulos did not come from Australia's intelligence services, but rather from Australian diplomats who were previously unknown to the FBI personnel handling the Paragraph 5 information. In various interviews, several FBI officials have opined the FBI was justified in opening Crossfire Hurricane as a full investigation because, in part, the information was given to the FBI from a trusted partner and therefore was deemed reliable. Although this sentiment is understandable, the FBI's well-placed trust in a foreign partner should not equate to confidence in the shared information itself. Australia could not and did not make any representation about the credibility of the information. Although the Counterintelligence Division did eventually seek information about Papadopoulos, the office found no indications from witness testimony, electronic communications, emails, calendar entries, or other documentation that at the time the FBI gave any consideration to actual trustworthiness of the information the diplomats received from Papadopoulos, an individual whom they described as, among other things, insecure and trying to impress them. The information from Papadopoulos was clearly raw and unevaluated. It was not the product of normal intelligence community collection and analysis, and it lacked the standard caveats accompanying uncorroborated information from an individual whose information was being seen for the first time. The information involving an ongoing presidential campaign was precisely the kind of unevaluated information that required rigorous analysis in order to assess its relevance and value. So there's a huge dereliction of duty right there. Nevertheless, the FBI predicated Crossfire Hurricane and its subsequent investigative activities, including the use of CHS's undercover operations and FISA coverage on the statements attributed to Papadopoulos. So here's what the FBI had at the time they opened Crossfire Hurricane. First, publicly available information concerning Papadopoulos' role in the campaign as volunteer foreign policy advisor. Second, information obtained from Papadopoulos by the Australian diplomats. Third, information about Russia's likely election interference activities. Fourth, Trump's public statements about Russia. And fifth, unvetted media reporting on possible ties between Trump and Russian businessmen. Significantly, beyond this, the FBI's Counterintelligence Division and its Crossfire Hurricane investigators did not possess any intelligence or other vetted, corroborated information regarding Trump or his campaign staff colluding with the Russian government. The FBI OGC unit chief, who advised on many Crossfire Hurricane matters and approved the case being opened as a SIM, FBI OGC Unit Chief 1, noted that she lacked, quote, knowledge of alleged ties between Trump and campaign. Noted that she lacked, quote, knowledge of alleged ties between Trump and campaign and the Russian prior to Crossfire Hurricane investigation formally opened. And we're going to hear more of that in just a moment. The FBI Inspection Division report describes similar statements by others. As noted in that FBI internal review, this total lack of intelligence did not appear to have been considered significant when opening a full investigation on persons associated with an active presidential campaign. As the record now reflects, and you're going to want to pay attention to this one, as the record now reflects, at the time of the opening of Crossfire Hurricane, the FBI did not possess any intelligence showing that anyone associated with the Trump campaign was in contact with Russian intelligence officers at any point during the campaign. Moreover, the now more complete record of facts relevant to the opening of Crossfire Hurricane is illuminating. Indeed, at the time Crossfire Hurricane was opened, the FBI, albeit not the Crossfire Hurricane investigators, was in possession of some of the Steele reports. However, even if the Crossfire Hurricane investigators were in possession of the Steele reports earlier, they would not have been aware of the fact that the Russians were cognizant of Steele's election-related reporting. The SSCI Russia report notes that sensitive reporting from June 2017 indicated that a person affiliated to Russian oligarch 1 was possibly aware of Steele's election investigation as of early July 2016. Indeed, an early June 2017 USIC report indicated that 2 persons affiliated with Russian intelligence services were aware of Steele's election investigation in early July 2016. Put more pointedly, Russian intelligence knew of Steele's election investigation for the Clinton campaign by no later than early July 2016. Thus, as discussed in Section 4D1A3, Steele's sources may have been compromised by the Russians at a time prior to the creation of the Steele reports and throughout the FBI's Crossfire hurricane investigation. So now we're going to get to where they finally interview the Australian diplomats, and Strzok goes August 2nd, which is 2 days after the Crossfire hurricane was open. He met in London with Supervisory Special Agent 1 and the Australian diplomats to kind of clarify what was going on. In preparation for the interview, Strzok and Supervisory Special Agent 1 sought the assistance of the FBI's Assistant Legal Attaché in London, UK Alat 1. UK Alat 1's primary FBI responsibilities in London included, among other things, collaboration and information sharing with British Intelligence Service 1. In UK Alat 1's interview with the office, he pointed out the inherent importance of sharing information with the British Intelligence Service that related to potential Russian intelligence activity in the United Kingdom. Thus, UK Alat 1 briefed the British Intelligence Service about Papadopoulos' allegations involving possible Russian influence in the Trump campaign. Given the nature of the allegations and the speed with which Strzok and Supervisory Special Agent 1 needed his assistance, UK Alat 1 assumed that the FBI's interview of Australian diplomats was exceptionally critical. UK Alat 1 also believed that the Crossfire hurricane investigators likely were in possession of compelling facts beyond what UK Alat 1 understood from the substance of Papadopoulos' claims in paragraph 5. Nevertheless, UK Alat 1's independent impression of the predication for the investigation was echoed by Supervisory Special Agent 1 in a link exchange with UK Alat 1, during which the predication was referred to as thin. UK Alat 1 also recalled Strzok making a comment in the taxi on their way to the Australian High Commission to the effect that there's nothing to this, but we have to run it to ground. These exchanges with Supervisory Special Agent 1 and Strzok resonated with UK Alat 1 because in sharing the Papadopoulos information with his British Intelligence Service 1 counterparts at the time, they expressed real skepticism about the motivations and reliability of Papadopoulos. UK Alat 1 told the office that British Intelligence Service 1 did not assess the information about the Russians and Trump attributed to Papadopoulos to be particularly valuable intelligence. Indeed, he told the FBI's Inspection Division investigators that, quote, the British could not believe the Papadopoulos bar conversation was all there was. And they were convinced the FBI must have had more information than it was holding back. As it relates to predication for opening Crossfire Hurricane as a full investigation, after Strzok and Supervisory Special Agent 1 had traveled to London and interviewed the Australian diplomats on August 2nd, the following link exchange between UK Alat 1 and Supervisory Special Agent on August 11, 2016 is instructive. Dude, are we telling them, the British Intelligence Service 1, everything we know, or is there more to this? Supervisor Agent 1, that's all we have. Not holding anything back. Damn, that's thin. I know. It sucks. UK Alat 1 went on to tell the Inspection Division that in discussing the matter with a senior British Intelligence Service 1 official, the official was openly skeptical, said the FBI's plan for an operation made no sense, and asked UK Alat 1 why the FBI did not just go to Papadopoulos and ask him what they wanted to know. A sentiment UK Alat 1 told investigators that he shared. And this is where we'll find out that the British were very aware that they were full of crap and were done with dealing with this in the fall of 2016. Later in the fall of 2016, UK Alert 1 was at FBI headquarters with some of his British Intelligence Service 1 counterparts. While there, members of the Crossfire Hurricane team played the audio-visual recordings of CHS-1's August 20th, 2016 meeting with Carter Page. UK Alert 1 said the effect on the British Intelligence Service 1 personnel was not positive because of the lack of any evidence coming out of the conversation. UK Alert 1 told the OIG that after watching the video, one of his British colleagues said, "For expletive's sake, man, you went through a lot of trouble to get him to say nothing." At a later point in time, that after the Mueller special counsel team was in place, UK Alert 1 said that, quote, "The Brits finally had enough." And in response to a request for some assistance, a British Intelligence Service 1 person basically said there was no expletive way in hell they were going to do it. So they were done with the FBI and this BS. Now they're going to go through some experts, and they're going to talk about what these experts knew at the time about Russia and the Trump campaign and what kind of collaboration was going on there. First, you got Jonathan Moffa. He served as the chief of the FBI's Counter Intel Analysis Section throughout 2016. Moffa was a career FBI intelligence analyst who began working as a full-time FBI counter-espionage analyst in 2004. And prior to being selected for the section chief position in January 2016, had been chief of the Russian Analysis Unit for approximately 4 years. Moffa advised investigators that he had heard nothing about Trump and Russia until events began to be reported in July 2016. The FBI intelligence analyst who had perhaps the most in-depth knowledge of particularly sensitive Russian intelligence information in FBI holdings during the relevant time period disclosed that she never saw anything regarding any Trump election campaign conspiracy with the Russians. Nor did she see anything in FBI holdings regarding Carter Page, Michael Flynn, George Papadopoulos, or Paul Manafort engaging in any type of conspiracy with the Russians regarding the election. Similarly, DNI James Clapper testified before Congress on the subject of Trump and Russia, and he answered no when asked if he was aware of any such evidence. The former DNI reconfirmed this fact when he was interviewed by the office and advised that he knew of no direct evidence that would meet the legal standard of conspiracy or collusion on Trump's part. Admiral Mike Rogers served as the director of NSA during the relevant time period. When he was asked about any awareness he had of any evidence of collusion as asserted in the Steele reports, he stated that he did not recall any intelligence that supported the collusion assertions. In that reporting, nor did he have any discussions during the summer of 2016 with his counterparts in the intelligence community about collusion between the Russians and any Republicans. Victoria Nuland served as Undersecretary for Political Affairs at the Department of State during the relevant time frame, a career employee of the Department of State and one of its most experienced Russian observers. She told our investigators that she never saw any U.S. government proof of the allegations contained in the Steele reporting regarding Trump and Russian officials, and further stated that, to her recollection, no information regarding a well-coordinated conspiracy between Trump and the Russians had ever come across her desk, with one exception. Nuland advised that she had received a 2-page summary of the Steele allegations from Jonathan Weiner, who in 2016 was serving as Secretary of State Kerry's special envoy to Libya. Weiner told Nuland that Weiner had prepared the summary from his review of the Steele reporting while he was at Steele's country house in the United Kingdom. Nuland thought Weiner had passed the summary to her sometime in July 2016. CIA Director John Brennan and Deputy Director David Cohen were interviewed by the office and were asked about their knowledge of any actual evidence of members of the Trump campaign conspiring or colluding with Russian officials. When Brennan was provided with an overview of the origins of the Attorney General's review after Special Counsel Mueller finding a lack of evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russian authorities, Brennan offered that they found no conspiracy. In fact, Special Counsel Mueller's report explicitly states that ultimately his investigation did not establish that the Trump campaign coordinated or conspired with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Relatedly, however, shortly after Special Counsel Mueller delivered his report to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General had issued a short summary of the report's findings, Brennan appeared on MSNBC's Morning Joe program, where he stated that he suspected there was more than there actually was. So he's still trying to push these lies even after he told the truth to the Mueller team. With regard to collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia in the 2016 election, thus suggesting that he had no actual knowledge of such information. Moreover, Deputy Director Cohen advised that he had no recollection of knowing anything Trump was doing with Putin, as opposed to what Putin and the Russians were doing to interfere in the election. Cohen stated that if there were such knowledge, it would have been included in a formal referral to the FBI. In addition, if the CIA had become aware of any U.S. persons being involved in a criminal conspiracy, it would have sent the information to the FBI in a formal referral. He advised that he was not aware of any such referrals in this matter. In any event, within days after opening the Crossfire hurricane, the FBI learned from interviewing the Australian diplomats that there was no reason to be unsure about what to make of the information from Papadopoulos. Not only had Supervisory Special Agent 1 and Strzok told UK Alat 1 that what they had was thin, but one of the Australian diplomats had told Strzok and Supervisory Special Agent 1 in their interview that the paragraph 5 information was written in an intentionally vague way because of what Papadopoulos did and did not say. Nonetheless, shortly after, the FBI opened full investigations of Papadopoulos, Carter Page, General Michael Flynn, and Paul Manafort. All four were U.S. persons associated with the Trump campaign, and all of them, other than Papadopoulos, had either ties to Russia or a history of travel to Russia. In July 2016, in addition to receiving the first several Steele reports, the FBI received a separate stream of information regarding Trump from a former FBI CHS, specifically an FBI supervisor from a New England field office. New England Supervisory Special Agent 1 was contacted unexpectedly by the former CHS, with whom the supervisor had worked many years earlier when assigned to a different field office on matters related to Russian organized crime. New England Supervisory Special Agent 1 agreed to meet his former CHS on July 21st, 2016. At that meeting, the CHS told New England Supervisory Special Agent 1 that he or she had been contacted by a colleague who owns an investigative firm and who was looking into Trump's various business contacts and ventures in Russia. The former CHS did not identify the investigative firm that day, except to say that the firm had been hired by the DNC and another unnamed individual. The former CHS then provided New England Supervisory Special Agent 1 with a list of approximately 45 individuals and entities who reportedly had surfaced in the firm's investigation of Trump's ties to Russia. The list was comprised mostly of Russian individuals and entities, and immediately raised red flags. So they start going back and forth with this information, and then it turns out that somebody else is contacting the FBI with the same exact information. And you see, after the Steele dossier was made public, New England Supervisory Special Agent 1 asked Supervisory Special Agent 1 if anything was to be gleaned from the information he provided in July. It was at that time that Supervisory Special Agent 1 let New England Supervisory Special Agent 1 know that his team had received the same information through a separate reporting stream from a different source, in context being Steele. Supervisory Special Agent 1 further advised that the second source was working with the same investigative firm that had given the information to the former CHS. Sometime later, New England Supervisory Special Agent 1 had learned that his former CHS had developed the information related to Trump while working with Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS. Thus, it appears that in July 2016, the FBI had not yet determined that the dual reporting it was receiving actually was coming from the same source, that is, Simpson and Fusion GPS, which are working for Clinton. Further, it does not appear that the FBI was aware of the fact that essentially the same information the former CHS was providing to New England Supervisory Special Agent 1 was being provided to the media by Simpson and Fusion GPS. This was a pattern similar to that later employed in the Alpha Bank matter, when the Alpha Bank allegations were provided to members of the media by Fusion GPS, and then to the FBI through Michael Sussman. Now, this will be the final section of the report that we read today, and we'll move on after this to in a separate video. Number 4, other investigative activity prior to the receipt of the Steele reports. Between the time the FBI opened the Crossfire hurricane investigation and when Crossfire hurricane investigators first received the Steele reports in mid-September 2016, the FBI took the following investigative steps. As discussed above, Strzok and Supervisory Special Agent 1 met with Australian officials to verify the information provided by Papadopoulos. Records and open source data were checked on the 4 Crossfire hurricane subjects. Travel of the subjects was monitored. Some records were obtained from other federal agencies and a foreign government. FBI CHSs and UCEs were used to engage with some of the subjects. The OIG review provides the following succinct summary of the FBI's investigative activity prior to the receipt of the Steele reports. By the date of the Crossfire hurricane team received the 6 Steele reports on September 19th, the investigation had been underway for approximately 6 weeks, and the team had opened investigations on 4 individuals: Carter Page, George Papadopoulos, Paul Manafort, and Michael Flynn. In addition, during the prior 6 weeks, the team had used CHSs to conduct operations against Page, Papadopoulos, and a higher-level Trump campaign official, although those operations had not resulted in the collection of any inculpatory information, which means any evidence showing guilt. FBI personnel told the OIG that, quote, the FBI did not use the national security letters or compulsory processes prior to obtaining the first FISA orders. FBI Deputy General Counsel Anderson said that early on the FBI managers took off the table any idea of legal process because the FBI was trying to move very quietly. Similarly, members of the Crossfire hurricane team told the OIG that they avoided use of compulsory legal process to obtain information at this time in order to prevent any public disclosure of the investigation's existence and to avoid any potential impact on the election. Notably absent from the list of investigative steps taken were the following non-public, non-compulsory options. So these are some things they could have done that they didn't do. Interviewing Page, particularly once the FBI's interest in him was publicly disclosed by the media. In fact, 2 days after this disclosure, Page wrote to Director Comey offering to be interviewed, but the FBI elected not to do so. Asking Page, who volunteered to be interviewed and had spoken with the FBI when asked to do so on prior occasions, if he would consent to a polygraph exam or provide access to relevant electronic records. Using other standard investigative techniques not requiring a court order, or interviewing Papadopoulos, the actual source of the paragraph 5 information. Another step the Crossfire hurricane investigators could have taken but chose not to take was the use of PIN registers and trap and trace devices. That way they can track their online activities. In terms of the analytical capabilities that were applied to Crossfire hurricane, Lisa Page testified that the FBI used, quote, line-level analysts who were super experts on Russia, end quote. The FBI's inspection division report found, however, that the intelligence analysts selected for Crossfire hurricane were uniformly inexperienced, and that none of them were subject matter expert analysts. Aside from Otten, the most experienced analyst had less than 9 months of experience working in that capacity. 2 had less than 4 months experience, and 2 came straight from analyst training. The analysis done in Crossfire hurricane was also limited by the Counterintelligence Division's failure to integrate the Directorate of Intelligence into the investigation, as required by policy. Rather, it, at least in one instance, Assistant Director of the Counterintelligence Division, Bill Priestep, appears to have deliberately shut down the involvement of the Directorate of Intelligence in an enhanced validation review of Christopher Steele, a key source. So that's going to do it for today. I hope that you got something out of this. I really want people to be able to see exactly what all of this says, and it's a lot of information. A lot of people don't have time to sit down and read it, so just want to try to share it with you and let you see for yourself what this report says and not have to rely on what other people's opinions are of the report. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe and wait around for the next section to come, which we will talk about Hillary Clinton and all of the things that the FBI found on her and how they treated her during those investigations. And it's not at all like they treated Trump in the investigation. So thank you for sticking around this long. Hit the like button, and until next time, peace be with you.